So you've got a load of devices who've got a load of different DRMs. At the moment, still a number of different streaming technologies as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, a very fragmented world, right? So,
yeah. So your attitude has to be, well, we can, but be aware of, as far as an operator is concerned.
Well, I think that we are going to be able to supply the appropriate kind of app model type security across a wide range of devices, and I think an increasing range of devices. But there will be some no-go areas, I think. There'll be some no-go areas in terms of device integrity checks and things like that, and people will have to realize the implications of jailbreaking their phone or rooting an Android device.
And your DRM watermarking, whatever, DRM will tell you about that.
That's one of the checks that will be required to make before or during the process of authentication of those devices.
I mean, can you end up with a situation where a pay TV operator is sort of saying to his subscribers a kind of 3 strikes and you're out type approach?
No, I think it will be more instantaneous than that, and I think that the chances are it may be managed on an asset or program by program basis, where it becomes necessary to make such restrictions. There may be a whole tier of service or tier of content which might be unavailable on certain kinds of devices, for instance.
But it might not be 3 strikes you're out, but it could be that instead of trying to achieve some absolute level of security, which we are sort of familiar with from the linear broadcast days, where the system was either secure or it was hacked and then it was broadcast and everyone could receive it, here perhaps where you have this rather more complex device environment, achieving security across every device is going to be very hard, but what you can do in a two-way world is to monitor what's happening, and you can both monitor what's happening on the internet, but you can see what devices are doing, and the device itself may detect whether it's jailbroken, but you may also look for unusual login behavior from users and see whether they appear to be logging in from a non-jailbroken device or they're exceeding their user authorization limits. And those things are very hard sometimes to do in absolute terms, to regulate those by a system where you allow someone 3 different logins on 5 different devices in 3 different locations. It sounds easy to do. It's actually probably easier to monitor what they're doing, and not so much 3 strikes you're out, but monitoring if someone is consistently exceeding what they're allowed to do or following an unusual behavioural trend, come back.
Is that familiar to Adeto, that once you're beyond the set-top box and you're in the software side, it's about monitoring the behaviour and closing it down, rather than knowing that you control absolutely everything to the device all the time?
Well, Adeto has always taken the approach with building their technology as that the security level that you introduce when you release a product, you know that absolute security doesn't exist going forward. So once you do it, you need to keep that software up to date. Even on the smart card world with the one-way system, we had a technology that we called FlexiFlash, which enabled us to update the software on the smart cards, because you know that come time, given money, a pirate will manage with new technology to break that. Now, all these design approaches we've taken into the new world, and you have to take that into a new world. The principles that you have to take in any of our products is that it needs to be traceable when something happens. You need to be renewable, so that you don't have to reinstall or change things at the consumer premises. But also, you need to work not only on the technology side, but you have to work on the law enforcement, on the laws, so that everywhere you're closing the net. You can't only protect it from a technology angle. Now, for that matter, for instance, Adeto has a company called Adeto, or a unit called Adeto Intelligence, that does a lot of web crawling and is able to, when we insert our own watermarking technology in the content, to find that back and take appropriate action. Because the 3 strikes out doesn't really work on live sports, because 2 hours later the game is over.
But I mean, in live sports, which is kind of the ultimate premium, if people can break into it ahead of time and redistribute it, I mean, when is somebody going to be prepared to broadcast in real time live sports to, let's say, an Android device?
I think you need to work with the sports rights holders to show the technology that you have, that you're able to actually.
Well, would Adeto recommend somebody does that now?
Well, what we're working with the studio or with the content owners and the operators about is that if you implement the watermark technology and the tracing and the web crawling, that you're able to, during a live match, be able to detect an illegal stream and take them down, be it broadcast or be it over the top. Now that will be the ultimate, because then before half match or before the end of the game, the stream can be switched off. When you do that, the confidence starts building up that you can actually use some over-the-top and broadband connectivity on somewhat more unmanaged devices. There's lots of work to be done there, both with the Hollywood studios as well as with the sports right holders. But the technology is advancing quite quickly.
And given where they were 2 years ago, extremely reluctant to put any content onto something that went multi-screen and beyond the set-top box, one assumes they're now pushing to have that level of security, if it's possible, quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, because it drives the competitiveness of the service offering, right?
And the consumer wants it.
On different, the consumer wants it. They expect it as a part of the subscription that they're paying, and I think that it's corrosive to the sort of perception of a service if you're enabling certain content on one screen and denying it on another without really any way to explain that kind of choice to the poor viewer, right? As Peter says, the technology is advancing very, very rapidly here, and it's you know, on the one hand it's driven by the content owners, and on the other hand it's driven by the technology vendors such as ourselves to combine a whole range of techniques. And that includes the authentication mechanisms, the integrity checks, and indeed watermarking, fingerprinting technology and things like that, in order to be able to provide a multi kind of layer defensive strategy, a multi-layer content and security strategy that actually gives people confidence that this is all possible. And the range of techniques you've got to apply just gets extended sort of year after year.
And the challenge for the OEMs or for the service providers, the operators, is to know which of the techniques they need to apply and for which content, because for sure you don't need all of the techniques for all of the content. So it's a real challenge, I think, for people to understand which ones.
Because otherwise you just get a big train crash of DRMs.
Well, if everyone tries to make everything totally secure, it's not going to work. Equally, if you go to the lowest level of security, you're not going to get the content. And because it's something which starts at as was mentioned, at the root of trust in the chipset, it's the hardware facilities, it's the way that the software is provisioned the devices are provisioned at the factory. It's a complete chain of management, and that makes it very hard for people to understand what they need today.
We talked about how this complete sort of fragmentation in terms of non-managed devices presents a real challenge from a security point of view and from a content provision point of view. If we get some standardization or even complete standardization in terms of transmission, things like MPEG-, and a lot more standardization in terms of DRM in the devices, is that all upside, or is there an argument that the more standardization you have, the more gateways that might give to concentrated piracy efforts?
So I don't think that standards like MPEG- present a security challenge per se, because all that's been done with the standard there is to harmonize streaming delivery formats and harmonize encryption mechanisms. And it's much like, going back a while, DVB Simulcrypt as a technology. And in fact, standards that exist today, like Apple HLS technology, have that same kind of harmonized encryption mechanism. It's the key management that the security vendors focus on that's over the top or overlaid onto the encryption mechanism, and it seems to me that is likely to remain for the foreseeable future very much a proprietary kind of interest of specialist companies like ourselves and Adeto. And what we've done in the streaming space thus far with HLS, for instance, will transfer quite well into the Dash standard. And you'll be able to take advantage of some of the extra facilities in the streaming in the streaming delivery and the extra devices that we'll be able to reach, whilst sort of taking advantage of the secure key management and watermarking technologies and things like that we've overlaid onto the existing range of devices.
But it's not so much the standards. There are two things to be concerned about. The standards themselves are a good thing. In fact, they enable wide distribution of content and they'll reduce the fragmentation of devices. But it's the implementation within a security standard. It's the implementation of that standard. So you can have, a good security system from an architectural point of view implemented badly in a device, and the keys will leak out all over the place. So I think that's one challenge, and that's something that the DRM vendors, the OTT device vendors, have still really got to get a complete handle on how devices are made securely and managed securely, whether they're a standard or a proprietary system. And the other issue that you just have to pay some attention to in your system design using standards, and we can learn here from DVB SimulCrypt, is that if you encrypt everything in exactly the same way and every device can receive exactly the same content, once you've broken it once, you have allowed yourself worldwide distribution and pirate content. So it's something which we can take measures take steps against and make sure that we don't suffer from some sort of easy break it once, distributed everywhere model, which is the risk of standards.
I fully agree with my two fellows here, because we need to learn from the best in the CA world and apply that into the DRM world. That means that things like Steve was talking about, key cycling in a DRM world is an inevitable feature that needs to be there. And as Andrew was mentioning, the standards will help to drive that more devices are available for the content to be consumed on, which means that the operator can monetize its asset over more devices. So in the end, standards are good, but let's not forget the heritage that companies like Verimatrix and Irdeto have for many, many decades in the past, and apply that into the future.